Internet. So, the DM decided that fantasy superheroes was getting fucking annoying, and everyone agreed that they were going to play dirt farmers instead. So, sessions came. Welcome back.
I don't want to play dirt farmers.
You're playing a dirt farmer, and you're going to like it. Also, I realized I failed in my objective to not curse in the first 7 seconds there immediately.
Good job.
God, Jesus Lord.
We're never gonna get monetized.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I'll try next time.
Can I at least be a mud farmer?
Yeah, mud's fine. Mud's acceptable.
Okay.
So, tis I, Emperor Joshicus, also with here
Joshicus.
I can't do that. I don't know enough lore to do this bit. Isaiah's here too. I was about to do a Warhammer bit, and I was like, I don't know enough lore. I'm not.
I was hoping you were gonna like shizzy and be like, AKA the 22nd Primarch.
I was gonna say like Primarch something, and I was like, I don't know enough to try this. Anyway, Isaiah's here.
Okay, I'm actually the Primarch of the Blood Ravens, Kleptomania,
and
I don't actually steal anything, but I do love them.
And Sam's here in the form of a sentient pile of rats.
Yes. Hi. I am the rat.
This is actually Sam's new form.
Is that why there was squeaking in the mic? God damn it.
Yeah, this is his new form. He's a sentient body of rats.
Don't worry. I'm basically like a rat ogre, but with an actual brain.
Nice.
Not like a storm vermin, where you got the little rat with the big brain attached to the big rat. No, just a rat ogre with a brain.
And
many rats stitched together.
Matt's not here because the warp blew up his brain, which is to say Matt doesn't have any power right now.
Yeah,
at time of recording, Matt has no power.
Yeah, the Bringer of Change decided to fuck Matt today and took out Matt's power, so
yeah. I don't get that reference.
Zinch wanted to turn Zinch doing his thing.
Understandable.
Anyway. Enough of that Warhammer nonsense, because I'll always end up in that place.
We're converting Matt to a Warhammer. Josh to a Warhammer fan.
No, we're not.
He thinks this is the case, but he's very, very quickly failing as he learns more and more.
Yeah.
Josh, the one who's always like, "Are we Dark Titan tonight?"
I am picking up a lot of information via osmosis, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Also, I like Dark Tide because guns shoot good. All right. I don't care about anything else. I do love Ogre. I do love Ogres though. Ogren are puppies that must be protected.
Ogren stand in front and protect friends.
Yeah,
but friend want to protect Ogren, so get in front. Me no understand.
Oh. Anyway, it occurred to me I have not informed you what the plan is today.
Nope.
Oh, also as a side note, yeah, obviously Matt's not here, so we're not finishing Matt's campaign saga quite yet. Hopefully Matt will be back next week, and then we'll finish that next week. Most likely, unless he has a part unless he has a part 4 in him, but I don't think he does.
I don't know. We spent an awful long time on some particular parts last time, so I wouldn't be surprised.
This is true.
I can imagine the great pranking to go on for a very long time.
I mean, we have heard that story before. But yeah.
Yeah, but you could want to tell it in its full to everybody else.
Either way,
listeners.
Before we get rolling, just take a moment. Take a moment for yourself and push the follow or subscribe button. For yourself.
Do it for Josh.
Do it for me. Make me feel better.
That's plus.
So because change is play, I'm just gonna spill the tea out on the table here. Because Matt losing power was rather unexpected. No one else had any plan, so I had to come up with a plan very quickly on the fly. Because we were banking on Matt doing all the work.
Yeah.
So a thought occurred to me.
He messaged us and told us he didn't have power at
told us yesterday.
He told us yesterday evening, but didn't say anything about it possibly coming back up, or not. And then, no.
Timing was very unfortunate.
The timestamp for you asking Matt how the powers for me specifically is 9/11. This is my 9/11.
Okay. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So I thought of an idea on the fly, and I think this is probably going to be something fairly like low pressure. This is just probably going to be opinionated story time, to be honest. Because a thought occurred to me, or a moment occurred to me from our previous session we had, where, you know, because by virtue of just where your characters were, it felt very, I guess for listener context, my players in my campaign currently are level 15. So we're in, you know, tier 4 of the game. We're in, like, it's big boy town. Big boy shit's happening all the time. Shit's crazy, you know, most of the time. And even when shit's not crazy, it's ramping up to the crazy. And just by pure circumstance of the area of my setting that the players went to, the game felt a little more like sub-level 5 D&D for a little while. It felt very like grungy low fantasy, kind of out of nowhere. And it wasn't, I mean, it was planned in so much that I knew they were going to go to that area, but the tone shift was not entirely planned. It just sort of happened that way. So that sort of got my brain thinking just very, very generally and very broadly about the topic of like low fantasy game versus high fantasy game. And the sort of like pros and cons and implications of the two various types. I tried to think to myself, I was like, does medium fantasy exist? And I think the answer is no. Because as soon as you switch the dial over, as soon as you switch one of the dials into the high fantasy realm, there isn't really, it's like a light switch. I feel like I don't feel like there's a lot of room in between kind of thing, you know?
Oh, interesting. Because sorry. I would argue that something like Castlevania could be applicable to mid fantasy.
See, I would call Castlevania low fantasy.
Well, to me, like, you know, Warhammer Fantasy to me is low fantasy, right? Where it's like,
yes, Warhammer Fantasy definitely is.
Like the most powerful thing you can do is, you know, throw a kind of large fireball versus, you know, Sypha who can teleport shit.
See, but that's where see, this is a key thing. Power level is not the dictator. I don't think. Power level is a facet of it, but I don't think power level is the end all be all of high versus low fantasy. In fact, in the grand totem pole of what defines your genre, I think it's pretty low on the totem pole.
Interesting.
So to kind of establish where we're at, my general definition, my understanding as I have gathered from, you know, books, movies, video games, etc., is that anytime you're getting into high magic, we're kind of using the term interchangeably, high magic, high fantasy, kind of means the same thing.
Yeah.
By the way, side note, sci-fi has this too, but I'm not as deep into sci-fi as a genre, so I don't know if I could break it down as much.
Sci-fi's a little bit different. And
yeah, the rules are.
I forget the exact terminology that's usually used.
Yeah,
but
it
depends on the level of technology. So like,
yeah, it's hard sci-fi versus.
It's like basically take Star Trek versus like, fucking. I guess Warhammer, really, because Star Trek is like, yeah, we just light speed jump.
Stuff just
really
happens
fast.
Yeah,
and we just have the technology. Meanwhile, Warhammer's like, we stopped developing technology ages ago. We got
it's kind of like
for that.
I think with hard sci-fi versus sort of space opera is the word that keeps coming to mind, but that's not the term. I can't think of what the other term is.
Space opera.
I mean, space opera is a specific kind of
subgenre.
Story.
Yeah. I mean, of course, being me, the only two things I could think of were like super robot versus a real robot, but like that's very specific to the mech genre.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so what I'll say is like Mass Effect, for example, is hard sci-fi because everything has very like we're specific and codified on the rules. We try to follow legitimate like actual scientists. We try to like extrapolate. Whereas Star Trek is the other thing that I can't remember the name of because works. Shit just works. Yeah, shit just kind of happens.
It's just magic. They say whatever explanation they want to, but there's no actual scientific explanation as to why the fucking replicator.
The replicator, yeah.
Like the replicator works.
Yeah.
You know, like.
But yeah, anyway,
thing. Smile.
That's sci-fi, which I'm not as deep into. Fantasy,
the holodeck.
However,
that's another thing. Holodeck. How the holodeck works. How does the holodeck work? Please tell me. I will.
So, illusions, hard light, and
okay.
Yeah, it's optical illusions and hard light.
We are getting down the wrong rabbit hole. It's cutting us off. No more Star Trek.
Yeah, but how does hard light work?
I don't know. We're not getting into it. We're not doing this. Anyway, point being, sci-fi I don't feel deep enough in the rabbit hole to speak upon, really. Fantasy, however, I definitely do. So my main distinction, there's a couple of things that can kind of make the distinction. But I think the biggest thing, the primary distinction for me is when you're dealing with high fantasy or high magic, you're dealing with a world where every Joe Schmo and his brother knows what a firebolt is, has seen a magic carpet, uses a potion on the daily. Like, every Joe Schmo has seen magic, knows about magic shit, knows about fantasy creature bullshit. Tim, your neighbor, might know how to fly a griffin. That's high magic fantasy, right? That's like, World of Warcraft is high fantasy, although it kind of didn't used to be, but nowadays it definitely is. Final Fantasy 14 is super high fantasy. I mean, 14's on like a league of its own.
14 is the type of fantasy that becomes basically sci-fi.
Yeah, well, it also crosses over, but like even just the magic stuff. I mean, like everyone in the world of 14 is fully aware of magic and how it functions, and any random Bob on the street could potentially tell you like how spells work. That doesn't mean they can cast them, but they might know how they work. You know what I mean? Everyone knows what a Sahagin is.
Theoretically, anybody can cast spells in 14. It just it depends on the spell is another thing, like, because everybody has
anyone can learn to be like a thaumaturge,
use the ether, like whether it's around them or in them, white mage, black mage style.
Conversely, the one you'll hear a lot bring up all the time, and it does work, The Witcher is low fantasy because all the weird shit exists, and there are sorcerers, and there are witchers, and there are monsters. But Tim the Baker does not know how to kill a cockatrice. He does not know what a fireball is. He couldn't tell you what sorcerers do. He might not even know what a sorcerer is. Like the common knowledge in The Witcher, everyone is mostly just medieval dirt farmer peasants. Whereas in something like Final Fantasy 14, even the dirt farmer peasant might have like an aether shard next to their house that they use to teleport into the main city. You know what I mean? That's kind of the big distinction for me. That's the primary thing I look for, is the common person's life. What is their existence like? And then that kind of determines the levels of thing. And the reason I say this is because you can't use the main characters, because main characters, by virtue of being main characters, are always going to see the craziest shit in the setting, right? Like, Geralt runs into the Wild Hunt because he's Geralt. Tim the Baker doesn't even know the Wild Hunt exists. And if you said those words to him, he would question what the fuck you were on about, or what drugs you were taking, potentially. Right? Whereas everyone in the setting of Final Fantasy 14 knows what the fuck a primal is. They might not see one, but everyone knows if you say the word primal, everyone goes, ah, shit. No, that's bad. We don't do that. We don't do that here. That's kind of the main thing. The other sort of sub things that can start to play into it is like Isaiah mentioned, power level can be a factor, because if a wizard in the setting is only ever to do like, they can maybe do some Jedi mind tricks and light a candle with their fingers, that's pretty low magic by definition, because there's a cap on their like strength. But you can have a low magic setting where there's a really powerful wizard that does crazy shit. It's just he's the only really powerful wizard in the setting, or there's only a couple of them. You know what I mean? So like the Black Company books are low fantasy. However, the main characters run into the crazy shit. So like, you know, last night we were talking about the wind whales, which are giant flying Cthulhu whale monsters. They exist in the setting, but they're so rare and so weird, and they live in such a dangerous place that when the main characters get there, they didn't know they were a thing, and they freak out when they first see the wind whales, because they're like, what the actual fuck is that? And then they find the flying manta rays that shoot lightning, and they further question their existence. Right? So like, that's the crazy shit's there, but it's not common. You know, so the power level can be a factor, but it's definitely not like a primary, I would say. Another common one is sort of the ubiquity of sort of like lightly magical items. So in a low fantasy setting, you're probably not going to have potions all over the place, right? And if you do have a magic healing potion, it's like the only one in town, and everybody has agreed we're only going to use that if little Timmy gets cancer. That's the only time we use the potion, because we don't know if we're going to be able to get another one. You know, whereas in high magic, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, Bob's got a potion, and Jimmy's got a potion, and Steve's got a potion, and Daniela is actually making potions right now. You know? So it's like the trinkety magically items. And those are kind of the main ones for me. There's probably some others I'll think of along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we were to like true up the categories, it would be readiness, availability, and power, right? Like how quickly, like how available is it? How quickly could a peasant get their hands on it? Which I guess, I mean, they're similar, but I find them to be kind of different, right? Because it's like, you know, you could get it, but it's $1,000.
Right.
You know,
yeah, they're around, but they're not necessarily available. Yes, that is a distinction.
So like, you know, readiness, or you could. So I guess you could also argue that readiness is like what's the word I'm looking for? This is gonna kill me now.
I don't know. Availability is. I don't know.
Like how suffused it is into society.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the Final Fantasy 14 thing, right? It's so suffused into society that people teleporting around with crystals is like not that weird.
Yeah.
Actually, in fact, it's quite normal. People do it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there's literally, I distinctly remember there being a side quest in 14 where someone's like, yes, the ether current down the street is closed, so I can't bring the cows out today. And you're like, yeah, put cows in that thing.
Yeah, literally, literally every peasant who you like talk to is like knows what an aether current shard is. Like that's like, yeah. I mean, and every major town has a giant magic teleporty rock in the middle of it. Like it's, you know, it's a little hard to miss.
They're also managed by a single person most of the time. Like,
yeah,
I
fucking Lolo.
What was I gonna say? Isaiah, you gave me the stupid now. God damn it. I don't know. Those are kind of the main factors. I guess, is there any other factors that you guys think of and or consider? Obviously, this isn't a hard line type thing anyway.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think you pretty much hit it, right? Like, how common is it? How available is it? And how strong it is it?
Yeah, I guess the one other thing I would maybe consider is how the distance from our actual real world, like scientific rules, to the settings rules. Like, so like monsters are a good way to gauge this, right? Like if the monsters are just animals with weird extra bits and bobs on them, that's pretty low fantasy. But if the monsters are like flying creatures that shoot lasers from their eyeballs, now you're starting to get more into the high fantasy realm. And also like the scientific, I think if you start to slap like scientific rules onto your fantasy setting, that instantly drops things down a bit, because scientific rules that you can replicate means that anyone could potentially understand them, right? Which is kind of a big thing in The Witcher, is like all of the monsters are studied like animals in the real world are studied. Like they're understood. There's things that they understand about like how their organs function, how they breed, you know, what social structures they like. All that shit is like well known in the Witcher universe. So that like science aspect brings it down from high fantasy just by default.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the I think it's in episode 2 of the show where the little girl's like, damn, you killed the Kikimora? That thing sucked. It showed up like 3 months ago and we couldn't get that thing to leave. Fuck, that was awful. You're like, tiny child, why are you aware of the giant 8-legged swamp monster? And B, why do you say it as if it's just like, oh great, you know, the like rabid chihuahuas like down the street showed up today.
Yeah. The rat infestation.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I think that's actually the first episode.
Is it?
I think so. So yeah, now let's just, you know, address the elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a loaded question? Maybe a little bit.
Possibly.
5e, what do you consider it?
Well, it's supposed to be low fantasy.
Okay, what's your take?
At least relative to like its lore, you know.
Mm-hmm. And you would say,
I think that depends on the plane, honestly, because it has planes now.
Oh, that's another one. If you start getting into interdimensionality, you immediately start bumping yourself into the higher fantasy genre.
Like,
yeah, I mean,
like it had like, yeah, sure, not everybody can do magic, but like wizards exist.
Yeah, well, also wizards
anybody who studies can become a wizard.
Yeah, anyone can study them. That's the big thing, is you can.
Anybody can study the spells. The thing is affording it, because the amount of money that it takes to just copy a spell is a lot. But like the thing is that anybody can learn how to do magic, and it is sort of readily available just because of the fact that
readily,
anybody can learn it. Like Joe Schmo down the street can learn it. He may not be great at it, but like he can learn a bunch of cantrips.
They also specifically added common magic items that are just like little magical doodads, right? So that's yeah.
I mean, so the thing with like the commonality of magic items, right, is that I feel like that wizards kind of fuck themselves, because they have this system of like common, uncommon, rare, very rare, and legendary, and then artifact. But they specifically say that even the most common magic items are super uncommon. So it's like, well, you're sort of
confusing.
Yeah, you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot, because you know they also very specifically say that magic item shops aren't a thing in standard 5e, right? But the game has so many magic items, and in a lot of cases, a lot of variation on the same magic item, right? You have like the Ring of Protection, and then the fucking the Cloak of Protection, the Boots of Elvenkind, the Cloak of Elvenkind, the fucking, you know, I almost said something else.
Yeah, I think
I'm just gonna say the Jockstrap of Elvenkind.
I think, yeah.
I was gonna say something way different. I just like, let me not.
I mean, you know, knock yourself out. Yeah, 5e is, yeah, you're right, Isaiah. They claim that it's supposed to be lore-wise low fantasy, but the game is very clearly not, for a whole bunch of reasons. You know, the magic items being an obvious one. The game has a major problem with ludonarrative disco biscuits. Have I talked about this before?
Yes, you have.
Have I explained my ludo? So, okay, for those listening, ludonarrative disco biscuits, which is not actually what it's called ludonarrative dissonance, which is the idea of when a game mechanic does not mesh with the narrative of the game itself. I'm right, Sam. This is not an invitation for a rant. Don't. I'm gonna bring up The Last of Us. Okay. In The Last of Us Part 2, for those who have played, the story of the game, there's a couple of characters that Ellie kills, and they make a big deal and a big scene about it. But the ludonarrative dissonance is very strong because up until that point in the game, you have murdered like hundreds of dudes in the gameplay aspects of the game. That's ludonarrative dissonance. I'm now going to call it Disco Biscuits.
I can feel Sam.
Yeah, you know
right
Sam
now.
wants to say something. That's why I was like, Sam,
I've
hold it in. I know, because me and you have gone on for hours, so I know.
I could go on for another 7 right now.
I know.
With
So
people started talking about the season 2 of Last of Us.
I know.
It brought it all back.
I know. So
It brought it up.
So with 5e, the ludonarrative Disco Biscuits is the fact that the game says, yes, magic items are uncommon. Even the most common magic items are not easily found. People with really high power levels like PCs are rare. Spellcasting is not easy. But then all of the game mechanics literally do the opposite, right? Every class in the game can get access to magic and spells pretty easily. Like every class has at least one subclass, nowadays more, that has access to spells of some kind. So even if you wanted to play like a barbarian, you could still have spells. It doesn't matter. You could be a zealot or a totem barbarian and you get spells. There's a shitload of magic items. And even if the game says they're not supposed to be all over the place, you are actively slapping your players in the face when you put so many in the game and then say, yeah, but you're not really going to get most of these. Like, it just doesn't work. And then it's like, oh, magic is like difficult to learn and hard to use. There's literally no mechanics in the game that make magic difficult to learn or hard to use in any fashion. You level up, you get your spells, you cast your spells. Like, that's literally it. So yeah, that's 5e wants to be, actually, 5e wants to be all genres of fantasy, and that's part of the problem, right? Because 5e does this whole thing where they're like, oh, well, when the players are level like 1 to 5, then it's low magic. But once they get to and then when they get to like 5 to 10, they might have run into a few more magical things. Then 10 to 20 becomes like high magic. It's like, but because the high fantasy shit is so ubiquitous in the game, even at the lower levels, your players are still crazy fantasy superheroes, and it doesn't ever feel like low magic very much. Unless your DM really goes out of their way to push that tone and really, really nails it down. And there's like,
I think the problem with it is literally the fact that we went from like 2nd edition to 3rd edition.
Yeah,
so it
kept ramping.
It went from low fantasy to a bit higher.
Yeah.
And then 4th edition. And then 5th edition just fucking literally like they boarded a rocket and just launched it.
Yeah, I mean, actually, some people say in some regards, 4th edition, you're even more fantasy superheroes.
Yeah, I mean, that's understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so the old editions of D&D, like 2nd edition, especially if you're playing like 2nd edition basic, absolutely, that was low fantasy as fuck. I mean, your wizard had one spell. You got a magic item every like 10 levels or something, probably. Like, that was low magic as shit. If you fought a dragon in 2nd edition D&D, that was like the craziest shit you had ever done. And
you are level 20.
And you probably only do it once in like a 4-year campaign of playing 2nd edition. You fight one dragon. You know what I mean? Like, that was absolutely low fantasy shit. 3rd edition started being the turning point by far. And that's not even me, and that's not necessarily saying it's good or bad, but it is a little weird that the game tries to sort of cling on to that old dungeon delvey low magic shit, but also doesn't. But now that we've taken 30 minutes to establish that nonsense, I'm generally curious where you two fall on preference. Like, do you want to go full gonzo, 14 level, fucking mech suits and magical nuclear bombs? Or do you want to take it down low and get a little witchery, get a little black company?
So here's the question: do you mean to play or to run?
We can do both.
Okay,
let's say both.
Sam, you want to take it away?
So it depends on the style of campaign. I'll be honest. So like, let's say we're like Strahd. I'll use the adventure as an example. I think Strahd should be more low fantasy in terms of players, because the whole experience of it being like a horrible place to be is kind of ruined when you are a magical demigod.
Yeah, true. When you're a fantasy superhero, not so
scary anymore. Like, yeah. It ruins the feeling of the entire adventure once you hit a certain level, because it's like, well, that's a scary monster, but like, how is it going to affect me? Like, I'm just going to Eldritch blast it from a mile away, and it's not going to touch me.
The funny thing too that you mentioned Curse of Strahd, Sam, is so many people have an issue with that, with Curse of Strahd specifically, that I see posts all the time where people would say, "I want to run Curse of Strahd. What game system does it better?"
Yeah,
I see people say that all the time.
It's because Curse of Strahd
got him.
Yeah,
because Curse of Strahd does not work in 5th edition.
It doesn't. It probably worked really a lot better in 2nd edition.
Absolutely, because it would be a lot scarier. Every single encounter past level 3 would be terrifying. Like, it just does not work the same way. And
no, it's still fun, but it's not.
Props on them for trying to translate it properly to 5e. However, like, there should be some serious fucking limitations, or like casting magic should just have different effects. Like like there are some, and they did this. They did think about that. They actually, I'm going to go into a little bit of the lore stuff. So they did think about how magic would change in Strahd's
Ravenloft
fucking bubble. Barovia, not Ravenloft.
Right, Ravenloft.
So like, okay, I'm happy that I was the only one struggling to remember what the fuck it was called.
So in Barovia, when you're in Strahd's magical, dimensional bubble, all right, his little pocket dimension, the size of a country.
Yeah.
Some spells do have slightly different effects. So if a character is revived at all, you are literally ripping their soul from Strahd and putting it back in their body. And they're supposed to go through, like, it's supposed to be a very traumatic event. They didn't do that with a whole lot of spells, though. They just kind of left it at that.
Yeah, and with that, you run into the problem of like, oh, it's supposed to be a traumatic event, but like mechanically, it doesn't do anything. Yeah, it's like,
exactly.
It's totally up to the GM to.
They were this close, and then they just kind of
this close
didn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
So like, it definitely could have been like they had the right ideas with translating it to 5th edition, but they were just like little far off.
Short of the target.
Obviously, you can run the game in a way that makes it more low fantasy. You can do that. That's a lot more work on the DM's part for a pre-written adventure. I like pre-written adventures. I think if you're gonna have alternate rules, that's fine. Like, you can run it 5th edition the same way that you run every game, or you could have an alternate rule set, Wizards, that changes how the game is played and makes it fit more thematically.
I think adventure modules should have customized rules to push the theme of the adventure. Like, that's what I want to see in an adventure module.
Like, Avernus had more vehicle rules. Like, they changed the vehicle rules.
Yeah.
Cool. However, running vehicles is still kind of lame.
They also took all the time to make these custom vehicle rules and then didn't give you any incentive.
Like, they
hit you with the, we got cars now. Oh shit, really? Yeah. What do they do? I don't know. You got cars though.
Yeah.
They work like a boat.
Yeah, I mean, they really it kind of relied on the player's own hype in the situation to carry it. Yeah. Which, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, worked.
I mean,
you,
to a degree, yeah.
Yeah,
it's just crazy to me that like Descent into Avernus, they put all this emphasis in the marketing about the Hell Machines, but there's not a single encounter that isn't a random encounter, right? There's not a single pre-written encounter that leans into or utilizes them, which is like, Ani the actual fuck. No, I don't. I just okay.
Yeah, it's yeah.
So okay, so Ravenloft type thing, point, lower magic.
If you're doing Ravenloft, it should be lower magic. Avernus, honestly, you're in fucking hell. I don't know how to tell you this. That should probably be high magic.
Now, is this? Are you talking right now? Are you saying for you as a player what you want?
Player and DM.
Oh, this is applying to both. Okay.
Yeah. I think it completely depends on the type of campaign. Like if you're going to do any kind of horror setting or like post-apocalyptic setting, magic should be lower. Like it should be much lower. Like it, fucking. I thinking about Apocalypse World. I'm like, yes, the weird boy.
Yes.
Like yes, this is Warhammer. Brainer. Thank you. That's not a very normal thing. That's a fairly rare thing in Apocalypse World for people to be brainers.
Yes. Also, they have pretty limited. Like they have effective abilities, but they are limited. They can't shoot mind fireballs.
Exactly. So apocalyptic setting, little lower fantasy, horror setting, little lower fantasy. Obviously, people are gonna know about the monsters and shit, but like the ready availability of the magic items or the magic and how strong it is, it should be lower just to really emphasize how the setting is. Now if we're doing like Lord of the Rings adventure, Lord of the Rings is kind of the middle ground because people can be a fantasy badass and they have magical items. Now it depends on the era that we're talking about in Lord of the Rings.
True, yeah.
I'm talking stuff about like the books, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Like that's a fairly middle ground because magic is.
Lord of the Rings is definitely lower. Particularly because even when magic does happen, it's not even clear that magic's happening. It's sort of implied.
It's not clear like where it's happening or even what the fuck is happening. What it does.
So I agree, but magic items are more common.
That's true.
That is true. Yeah.
So that's why I said it's like that kind of middle ground because the magic itself is more subtle, but magic items are more prominent.
Yeah, I was gonna say that in of itself is a little bit of ludonarrative disco biscuits, right? Because in fucking Lord of the Rings, you can't walk 10 feet without tripping over an ancient sword from 10,000 years ago.
I mean, a little, a little bit. So, okay, so are you saying, Sam, you don't have a strong you don't prefer one necessarily?
It just depends on the type of campaign. That's it. I don't have a particular preference because, as I said, Strahd is a great example of what should be lower fantasy and not high fantasy, and the fact that 5th edition is the way that it is kind of ruins it.
Yeah. Isaiah, where do you fall?
My brain's shorting out. This is this is the what I prefer running, right? Like running or playing.
I say do both. Give me running and give me one.
I was just double checking.
They could be different. They could be the same. They could be different.
Yeah. No. Well, for playing high fantasy for sure. I just like to because it's especially if you're playing something kind of like 5e, right? You can get away with a lot of shit, right? Like if you're in the scene and your character just smokes a cigarette, you can be like, oh, my character snaps his fingers and the cigarette lights up, and there's some interesting shit you can do there. And it's you have almost endless space for creativity. This is actually I think high fantasy sort of comes in the opposite of where art usually gets its chops from, right? Where the idea of if you don't have any limitations, it's harder to come up with something. When you're playing and you don't have any limitations for what you can do because everything's presented to you, there are no rules, right? Anything goes, which can be really fun at times. It can be a little exacerbating for the DM to keep up with all the shit that you're making up on the spot, for sure. And I wouldn't use it too willy-nilly, but it does have a lot of like perks for players.
The thing is in the long term, right? Like, think about, you're playing a whole campaign. Still, like, does that keep up?
I think so. I think if you sort of if you suffuse it enough into the world itself, it sort of maintains itself in a weird way, right? Like, because that's what becomes the crux of all of the struggles. You don't chase someone through the street, you chase them into heavy flying carpet traffic, and that becomes its own thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, running a game, low fantasy. I don't want to have to think that hard. I don't want to have to think about the metaphysical limitations of what, a sending spell can do, and if words actually exist. Like, can you sending someone a picture? Is that a thing you can do? Maybe. Who knows? Yeah. So, I actually, I like the game that I'm doing, where there is unexplainable phenomena and mutation. Like, yes, it is post-apocalypse, but you could make a pretty good argument for it being wacky woohoo magic in the real world.
Your setting, I would say, is pretty low fantasy most of the time, because the weird magical phenomenon is not like understood, studied.
Exactly. Yeah. So, for running, low fantasy.
Okay, how do you reconcile that though? Like, you're like, I want someone to run a high fantasy game for me, but I'm not going to do it for you.
Oh, I know it's hypocritical, for sure. I'm not going to pretend it isn't.
Okay, you just vibing with it?
Yeah, look, no one's perfect. If this is the weird thing that makes me kind of a schmuck, there are worse things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough. I was just curious. I mean, I'm not saying...
take a bigger L.
True. I mean, I'm not saying it's good or bad either way. I was just wondering if you thought about the sort of funny hypocrisy of it.
Oh no, for sure.
Okay.
If I didn't, I would. If I didn't and got roasted for it, I would just be like, you know what, that's fair. That's harsh but fair. Guess I'll just take this L.
This L, I shall hold this.
Yeah. So,
yeah. Interesting. Okay, well, I guess I'll just take the hard line in the sand and say I just strictly I didn't have an answer for this until pretty recently, I think. But I think I can pretty firmly put my foot in the ground and say I prefer low fantasy like 90% of the time. And the reason for me, and it is not, although what you said is kind of funny, Isaiah, but not at all what I was thinking. Of the, like, I don't want to have to think about the implications of it, which is true. That is absolutely a factor. But for me, the reason I prefer the low fantasy shit is, I mean, I guess there's, now that I'm thinking about it, there's kind of a lot potential reason. But I think the big thing for me is I want magic shit or the not normal shit to feel like fucking magic. Like, oh goddamn, that's crazy. Like, my problem with high fantasies, it takes the tone of something. It's like, this is magic, and just turns it into like, this is just a thing that exists, like the weather, like in Final Fantasy, we were talking about, right? In 14, Aether shards are this like crazy inherent magic technology, but nobody looks at them that way. Everyone looks at them the way that we look at cars. Like, yeah, there's Aether shards. We use them. You know what I mean? And in the same way, in real life, if you showed a car to a person in the 1500s, they'd be like, what the actual flying fuck? You know what I mean? Like, is that a dragon? Like, what is that? So I like my magic shit to really feel magical. And I it's hard to do that with a high fantasy setting. Now, granted, there are ways that you can sort of adjust the knobs and dials and and focus on specific things. Like, for example, you can have a really high fantasy setting, but then like, oh, all the dragons are extinct, and then your players run into a dragon and it's like a big deal. So you can do that kind of thing. So it's not impossible, but generally I really like the reaction of like main characters walk into town. Local town has a crazy powerful druid that runs the place, and all the characters go, "Did you just make that bush talk?" He's like, "Yeah. Why?" He's like, "You can make bushes talk?" Like, what? You know, like that reaction, that vibe of like, holy shit, is great. You know, I mean, again, the Black Company is a big reason I started thinking about this recently, by the way. Because I think the Black Company is a really good example of how to do this. I started thinking about, I was like, I was gonna say the scene, but it's an entire chunk of one of the books. I mean, it's like several chapters where the main the Black Company, the mercenaries, are living in this place called the Plane of Fear, and they're surrounded by flying Cthulhu whales, manta rays that shoot lightning, rocks that can teleport and talk to them, weird centaur monsters, talking vulture creatures, and the whole time they're sitting there and complaining and saying about how everything's awful and shit's weird and why is that rock stalking me? I mean, like literally a character complains about one of the rocks stalking him at one point. Because the rock stalks him. Like
Sam, it reminds me of the Emperor TTS where Martius Calcar's like, I hate it here. And the guy's like, why? Is it because everything's weird and purple? He's like, no, because the warp fucking sucks.
Yeah, I mean it's both, right? That's the thing. It's like, I mean, there's a scene where they have to go talk to the god of the Plains of Fear, which is literally a talking sentient tree thing, but it doesn't talk with like words. It like psychic like mind talks to them, and nobody wants to go talk to the psychic tree because everyone's scared of the weird psychic god tree. Like that whole vibe is like, it's great. And the other thing too is, when you cut away to a different character's perspective and that shit's not going on, and then you come back, you're like, oh yeah, there's all, what the fuck is on? We're back in Crazy Town.
Everything blows here.
Yeah, you're like, oh. So it's like, and of course the main characters at a certain point get kind of jaded to the crazy shit, but some of them every once in a while are still like, God, this ain't it, Chief. So yeah, that tone is great. It adds, I don't know, it adds like an interesting texture to things. But, however, I do like having a character or a group of characters who are the Geralts of the setting, right? Like, it is good to have the character who's like, oh yeah, a cockatrice, yeah, I've killed like 5 of those, and all the other people are like, what do you mean you've killed 5? I've never heard of, what the fuck is a cockatrice? Like, don't worry about it, I got it. Like, you do have to have your Witcher characters who know about all that crazy shit. Mm-hmm. That should be your PCs in your game, right? Like that's the whole thing. Is the PCs walk into town and say, we heard you have a cockatrice problem, and the peasants go, a cockahuda what now? And the PCs go, the big bird that turns people to stone. Oh, the stony bird. Yeah, the stony bird. Never all the PCs go, yeah, sure. Yeah, the stone bird.
Yeah, all right, Grandpa.
Close enough.
Point us in the fucking direction, please.
Point us in the direction of the stone bird, yeah. Like, that's what I love. And I actually, and not for nothing, I suppose I'm sort of transitioning into my next point here. That makes your PCs, like, seem like cooler badasses, you know? Because there's a big problem, and people do this with D&D constantly. Not just D&D though. Pathfinder, same shit. Shadowbring. What?
Shadowbringers, yeah.
Shadowrun. Exact same problem. Like, where the DM's like, oh, you talk to this super badass guy, and the players are like, I bet I could take him. You go, no, you can't, because he's a level 35,000 space wizard. He'd fucking delete your brain with his pinky, and you're like, okay. And then fucking 5 minutes later, you meet another NPC, and the GM goes, and this is the God Emperor of the universe. And you're like, okay. And then you meet another PC, and this is the King of the Nether Dimension. You're like, oh my fucking, could we just, like, the players are like, why are we here? If everyone's so much cooler than us, why are we here? And that shit is awful. And I've been very conscious of trying to not do that with our game currently.
Real quick, have you ever had that like moment? Like, genuinely, have you ever had the like, why the fuck am I here right now?
Where the NPCs are so much cooler than you that it's like, what's the point? Yeah. Have
you had that before?
Good question.
I have.
I'm trying to.
This is not like a. Do you even know? No, it's because it is the theoretical versus the practical, right? You're like, this sounds like it sucks, and you experience it, you're like, this is next level trash, bro. I really hate this.
I don't think I have. I don't think I have Sam. Does that?
No.
Nothing coming to mind?
Nothing coming to mind directly. I mean, like, No, not.
What?
The only thing I can think of is like, boss fight. Why is the way is, but also like, if fighting a boss, like they should be stronger than you.
Mm-hmm. What's the specific example, Isaiah?
So this was really, really early on into the first game I ever played in. And we had gone into like the biggest country. It was like the equivalent of like Reichland in Warhammer Fantasy. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was based on Reichland, actually.
I don't know what that means.
Warhammer Fantasy Germany.
Yeah.
Think like
literally called Reichland.
Yeah, think like 16th century Gothic armor Germany. Or 15th century Germany.
Didn't want to assume.
You can't get more on the nose than that, really.
We got there, and then we got they let us into the castle, and we're like, all right, cool. And they were like, okay, so you have to like talk to the king a certain way, you have to do a certain thing. You're like, okay, cool. And then one of the characters was like, I think he literally was like, if this guy's so cool, how come he doesn't like do anything? Like, why is he just sitting here? Yeah, and the guy was like, "Oh, well, he's just much too busy." And I'm like, doesn't this guy ride a lion into battle with like an artifact level sword, and has like this crazy powerful armor? Couldn't he actually just smote one of us in one shot? And it was, all of the answers were yes, and we were just like, then do you want to help? And the guy was like, no. And then he sent us to another character who was this super powerful fucking veteran soldier dude who like took on, he was like Guts basically. And then we found like these crazy dragon people who all could kill us super easily. It kept going of like these guys who could kick your fucking ass. And it got to a point where I, the spiteful shit that I am, started thinking about it, right? Like I started doing the numbers, and I was like, well, if I do this much damage per round, and I hit with like an average of this because of my modifiers, and I can defend myself X like direction, can they actually kick my ass? And I don't know, because I never got any of the actual math, but I felt pretty confident in being like, I feel like my character's just power built enough to survive this. And for the record, yeah, I power built the shit out of this game, which, I've said before, we needed to, along with some bending of the rules and spell slots. Some
conveniently forgetting.
Yeah, some conveniently forgotten spell slots. I definitely didn't cast Fireball about 12 times in one session. That's an exaggeration. I think I cast it like 5 or 6 times when I only had 2 third level spell slots.
Enough.
Yeah, enough for it to be like people to be texting me and being like, that was, you're out of. And I was like, yep, no, I know. And they're like, all right, cool, just checking.
I know. Don't say shit. Say nothing.
Yeah, it's just like, don't you fucking Blue Falcon on me right now. Yeah. Again, after the fact, the GM sort of apologized, and like kind of, he understood his mistake. I've talked about it before, yada yada, with Cardell. But yeah, it is worth bringing up. Very early on, we were just like, what the fuck is that? And when I gotta specify, we were level we ended the game at level 14, so I think this was around level 8 or 9, and there were 7 of us. And like, granted, you're sub level 10. You have to expect that you're gonna get your shit thrown out a little bit. But this was also when we were like effectively level 16, because we were like level 8 in one class and level 8 in another. So it was, yeah, it was a time.
That's one of those things where, and that tends to be a problem more in high fantasy, just by the nature of more ubiquitous magic and higher power levels tends to make that come up more. That's not to say that it's not impossible for that to happen in a low fantasy game either, right? Like, you could be running, you could be running a game in the Witcher universe and your players just so conveniently happen to meet Geralt and Vesemir and Cirilla and Yennefer all in the same room at the same time, and your players go, okay, well,
yeah, your character who's totally evil and who is going to kill all the players walks in this room and goes, oh,
yeah, like it can happen, but it's a lot less likely. It tends to happen less. The other thing that I was thinking, the reason I prefer low fantasy, is because I like when problems have to get solved in like a real like grounded human kind of way, and like magic could help, or like the weird fantasy shit can help, but you can't just burn a spell slot and finish the problem type situations, you know? Because that tends to get like. And again, obviously, if you're doing a high fantasy game, you're conjuring up different issues. But I like the thing where it's like, oh, the little girl is sick, and like we don't have a way to fix it. But like if we go grab this rare root, it'll perfectly cure the problem she has. But the root's in a cockatrice cave or whatever. As opposed to, well, I can cast Greater Restoration, she'll be fine. You know?
Yeah. Well, so I actually have another example of an instance where high fantasy can come to the same effect. It was in a game I played like about a year ago, and the character got hit with like magic shrapnel, right? Like a crystal exploded. They were embedded with these like crystal shards that were killing them slowly. And what we basically had to do was start casting a bunch of spells in a very specific sequence to fix the problem. So like I was like, okay, someone has to cast Levitate to get them off the ground. Another person has to cast Etherealness on them so the shards will fall out, because the shards aren't being they're not counted as carried or worn, right? And then you have to cast. Yeah, and then you need someone to cast Greater Restoration to remove the curse, which can only be removed when the thing is removed. Like, there was a lot of steps. And the creativity of like using the spells in tandem was really satisfying when it like worked at the end. I know that this is very rare. This is not going to be everyone's experience. I get it, but it is worth bringing up.
No, I know. I mean, it can be potentially everyone's experience, because I think you hit a point on that one, which is to say that's kind of what I was saying before, where I was like, the problems that you're going to come up with as a GM when dealing with a high fantasy game are going to be a different sort of issue, right? In a low fantasy game, the idea that the player got hit with like magical crystal grenade that embedded crystal shards in his chest already is weird. You know, you probably good chance you won't even get to that point. So like, but in a high fantasy game, it's like, oh, okay, so like crystal grenade problem, weirder problem to fix weird issue, or weirder solutions to fix weird problems. Yeah, you adjust the problems you're running into. It's like a high fantasy character. It's like, oh, we need to get to from one end of the city to the other. Well, it's fine. I could just use my flying carpet. That's not a high fantasy problem. High fantasy problem is, we're 3 nations away from the place we need to be. Also, they're being attacked by dragons. Okay. That's going to require more steps for me to solve than just the magic carpet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You adjust the problems. But yeah, I just tend to prefer the sort of almost like Norse or Greek hero style story of like, Perseus has one magic item, right? He's got Medusa's head, and he uses that motherfucker to solve all sorts of issues, but none of them are like slay a dragon level shit, right? It's like, oh, my dickhead dad, turn him to stone.
Well, I mean, he does kill the Kraken.
Later, yes, he does later. Yeah, Perseus levels up a bit later and it gets a little out of hand, but like early days.
I just think of the slaps Medusa head, you can get so much mileage out of this.
I mean, that's literally what he does, though.
Medusa's still alive, and they're like, "Ow, hey, asshole!"
It does become his go-to trick. Yeah. I just like the tone of those better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get you.
And also, if you want to, get into the high fantasy vibe, you can do it from time to time, right? Like where you switch back and forth sometimes. So like you're running a Witcher game, and or a Witcher style game, really. It's like, oh, the peasants don't know what a cockatrice is, but then the next adventure we're like partied up with a mage and like we're actually gonna fight a dragon and shit gets crazy for a while, and then next adventure things kind of lower back down. You could do a little ebb and flow there too, which I guess you can still do in high fantasy, although I feel like it's harder to do that.
Yeah,
so really think about it.
Yeah, I think the thing that you run into with high fantasy, right, and that I think that a lot of people run into with high fantasy, is they think that high fantasy is just, magic nukes out the wazoo 24/7 all day, every day, right? And if you're running, you run into a similar problem that Matt ran into, which is just, you get a magic item and you get a magic item and you get a magic item. It's like you can do that, but you have to give them the lower level ones, give them maybe all of them have like 10 common items, and they have to figure out these complex problems with the sparse level of power they do have. It's just that they have a lot of it in quantity, but not a lot of it in quality,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or if you start giving them like 9 live stealers and magic carpets and immovable rods that are portable holes, then you start running into some problems pretty quick. But
don't
overload your players with the shit too. Giving your players a fuck ton of magic items, or even I think 5th edition has a problem with allowing you to buy magic items just straight up in the rules. That's nice, but and it'll be like, oh, it's rare, so it costs more. It's like, okay, but there's no rules to see if they have the item at all.
I think there's some very light stuff, but it's not. It's like it is that one's kind of a tricky example though too, right? Because on one hand, you want to say, the magic items are rare, so you can't buy them. But on the other hand, 5th edition players do often kind of want to buy them, right? Like the magic item shop is such a hot debate topic all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good example of a low or a high fantasy problem you need to solve is the magic item shop, because it's I want to give it to my players because I'm running a high fantasy game. How do I solve that problem? How do I control the flow of the hose of magic items? Even with my game right now, which you two are players in, it is really high fantasy, and I did that on purpose because I was playing 14, and 14 was leeching into my brain in a lot of ways. So there's a lot of sort of 14-esque energy going on there. And I thought about the magic item situation. I was like, how do you make the magic item thing make sense? And kind of the conclusion I came to is, well, if magic is really ubiquitous, there's also going to be ubiquitous rules, laws, and people who take care of that problem in the same way that... All right, this is kind of a weird analogy, but it works. In the same way that guns are ubiquitous in America, and so there's rules and laws and things to keep track of, and tags and permits and all this shit, right? Magic items would be much the same, right? No, Jim, you can't just have a free flame tongue sword. You need to show me your flame tongue permit. You know what I mean? So that was kind of how I tackled it, and it's not the only way to tackle it, but that was how I came at it. I've also heard people say, "Oh, the magic item is or the shop is in another dimension that the players only get to if the person who owns the dimension lets them in, so they can't go to it whenever the fuck they want. They go to it when you give it to them as a treat, basically." Or the other one I've heard is the magic shop can be found kind of anywhere, but only the people that work for the shop know how to go to the pocket dimension where the magic items actually are. So you can't just steal them all. So there's lots of ways to tackle it.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea. Fucking LP did this in the Fire Emblem game, where he was we had this one shopkeep. It was this creepy fucking old lady who quoted the shopkeep lady from Star Fox Adventures.
Oh, what the fuck?
No, that's too low. And she would just fucking show up with some crazy powerful magic items. And we were like, how do we find you? And she's like, you don't. I'll find you. And we're like, oh,
Yeah, exactly.
that's intimidating.
Yeah, that's the interdimensional pocket method, right? Like, yeah, she rolls up when she fucking feels like it. Yeah, or this is kind of a goofy way to do it, but also makes sense. But like Sam in the Goon Academia campaign, right? You're like, well, Shandul has all the magic items he wants, but you have to play his stupid games in order to get them.
Yeah.
And you have to survive. Right? So
you have to play his stupid games and you have to win.
Yeah, he sticks them in his death labyrinth. So like, good luck.
Gee, have fun.
Which is, makes sense. It's also a good reason to justify why there's like weird magic items in random dungeon places.
Yeah.
Like easy justification. Crazy wizard did it. Crazy lich man just doing whatever the fuck he wants.
I love crazy wizards doing whatever they want.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Good genre.
And also to any astute listeners, yes, I'm aware that I just talked about how I prefer low fantasy and then just very explicitly said how I have a very high magic game. It be like that sometimes.
I don't say, bud.
Yeah, when I came up with the game, that was the one I was in the mood for. Now I'm sort of less in the mood for it, but whatever. Like that's kind of like it's where I'm at. So I'm kind of like,
you gotta do.
Yeah, you do what you gotta do. But also, I'm taking the high fantasy stuff and being like, all right, let's push my players into an interesting direction using the high fantasy thing, because I think that's the key, right? Because a lot of people run into this problem. I think I'm having a brain blast. A lot of people run into this problem where they're running a Final Fantasy 14 campaign. We got Aether Currents, we got cell phones we got tomestones, which are just cell phones. We got fucking mech suits that can fly. We have flying machines. Garlemald has cars, literally. Like they got all this crazy shit. So it's like, how do you? What do you do with the things that the players are going to do? And a lot of people want to run their Final Fantasy 14 game, and then the quest that they have to do is like, go save the goat herder's goat from the basilisk cave. And it's like, well, that's not, you got high fantasy setting, low fantasy quest. And then at a certain point, it's not going to work anymore because the players, if you're running 5e, for example, the players are going to get so dumb powerful that the problem of like, oh, the little girl is sick gets cured with a spell slot. Oh, the goat herder can't find his goat gets cured with like locate object or what, or a spell like locate object, Oh, the weird spooky magical item gets defeated by legend lore. Like the players are going to get into wacky woohoo town. You can't give them low magic quests or problems to solve. You have to give them high magic problems to solve.
Okay. So I have to say something real quick. Gotta say this. In the situation where you're running a high magic game and the little girl gets sick and the players have the spell slot, don't do this. Don't make the anti-magic disease. Don't do it. It sucks. It will just breed resentment in your players because it feels like, why the fuck am I this powerful if I can't cure this child of like the walking pox? You know what I mean? Don't do that. Like I've seen it be done 3 separate times in 3 separate games and with 3 separate miserable failures. It sucks. No one wants to do it. Your players don't care. If there's like a huge, like, if you want, right, the way that I've sort of thought about doing like the super crazy mega disease is just like, you need a population size big enough, right? If there's 50 people in a village, you can just put 50 people on one side of the village for a week and feed them in a hospital. And then every day, you got 10 spell slots for from Lesser Restoration, you're good.
Yeah.
What you need a high population size, and you need a disease that spreads super quickly, or like maybe the food's contaminated, like they just keep getting reinfected, right? Like if your population gets food poisoning every single day because they're eating bad chicken nuggies, like,
yeah, there's not enough magic to keep up.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to make it unsustainable that you're playing. And like, you know, maybe we treat this, we're gonna treat it a little bit like 40K, right? What if there's like a crazy plague and you're being attacked by zombies at the same time, right?
Right. You're never that's a high fantasy problem.
Yeah, that is a high fantasy problem. You know, there are ways around it. You might not like it. Like if you don't like, you know, building combat for 5e, you're sort of stuck because you assumed that the magic disease was going to be a sort of puzzle style problem or a roleplay problem. It's not entirely. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. I promise you, your players, I mean, they won't thank you because they didn't know it was a problem in the first place. But if they did, they would thank you.
Yeah, right.
You know, just let them know. Just let them know. Just be like, hey guys, I want you to know I was going to do a crazy magic plague that you couldn't fix with magic. I decided against it. And your players will almost definitely go, oh, thank you for that, because that would have sucked. And then you'll feel good on the inside.
You know, it's funny because I was literally just about to ask you, is there a way you, because like as soon as you said that, I was about to challenge you and be like, all right, so is there a way you could do it well? And you basically you answered that question. However, just to drill it down a little bit more, just because I'm curious, is there a way you could do it where it's like small population, one little magic disease you can't fit? Is there a way to say no, you can't fix it with spells that isn't annoying? Is there a way you could do the tiny village, one girl has this one weird problem thing?
Do you want? I have an idea.
Thought, yeah.
Magic suppresses the effects of the disease, but it does not fix the disease.
Okay, so you're still helping the situation in some way.
You are helping the situation, but it's not a, like, instead of it being like a magic disease. Button. Exactly. Like, your players are too low of a, like, let's say it's a greater restoration needed for the curse spell, whatever. You have lesser restoration. Lesser restoration helps, like, lessen the symptoms, extends, however long they'll survive, whatever. But it doesn't fix the problem outright because you as a player are not, like, your magic isn't good enough. You need something else. Like, it could even be like a ritual with many people, but you don't have the people. You need to go and get the people. Like, even if it's just like a small, slight tweak to that, like, because I don't particularly like magic disease unless, like, the disease is not even magic. It's actually, like, for instance, like a slod.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the slot is the ultimate way, right? It's like, it's not a disease, it's a parasite. Because it's not magically based. It doesn't count as, like, the specific conditions, so the thing that cures the specific conditions doesn't work. That, I think, is perfect. Because I've done, like, one of the ones in question was like, oh yeah, you can suppress it. And then the question is like, well, if I can't, I think we had access to like 6 level spells. And we were like, if I cast Greater Resto on this 6-year-old girl who's got, hypergonosyphilades, like, are you really telling me it's not going to work? And then for the GM to look at you with a straight face and be like, nope. And you're like, but this burns a material. And they're like, yep. And you just sit there doing that thing where you awkwardly blink at them,
Yeah, it's just rude.
Like, I blink.
Yeah, it's such a pain in the balls. Like, I'm sure there are people smarter than I who fixed it, or who could figure it out. But it just sucks so bad. Like,
yeah,
I got so bad at one point, my character was like, I'm 2 seconds from lighting Molotovs and burning the village down. This is just not worth my time anymore. Chaotic good, return that shit to lawful evil. Like,
yeah. I think, Sam, you definitely were, I think we're on the right track there. Cause I was kind of thinking, you can fix it with like your magic or whatever, but like it's gonna take time or there's a challenge. So like, for example, you can remove the curse, but you're gonna have to cast the spell remove curse like 4 times, for example. Yeah. And every time you do it, maybe there's like a test or something. So there's a chance of failure. And then naturally the players are gonna go, is there something we could do to, better our chances, like, weight the odds in our favor? Oh yes, you can go get this magic flower that grows nearby. That'll give you advantage on the roll, blah, 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 that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I would be okay with the checks. Like, I'd be a little annoyed at the start, but like,
well, that's the thing about the checks method is then when the players offer up like ways to solve it that are not just the auto win button, then you immediately lean into those suggestions that they give you, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
And then as a player, you feel big brain.
You do, yeah. So like what I was gonna say is like initially I'd be a little mad, or I'd be annoyed at the very least. But then, give me like an hour or however long, and I'll like, it's pretty easy to see that when a GM does that, they're actively trying to find a middle ground with you. And at some point, you just got to level with the GM and be like, all right, I understand. I get it. I'm playing along. I'm not going to be an asshole,
Yeah. And usually when you're doing something like that, from the GM side of the screen, what you're trying to do is set up a challenge or a thing or something interesting, but you don't want to say what you're trying to set up straight up outright to the players, because that sort of kills some of the like verisimilitude. So yeah, it's like usually there's a reason, but yeah, if you're just doing it because you just really are like, fuck Greater Resto, bro, like that's not the right way to come at it at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another like a problem that I do have with D&D is that magic, in a lot of circumstances, like again, going back to Strut, it just kind of ruins
shit.
A lot of the stuff, like, or things you can plan.
Oh.
Like a lot, like I am okay with it at the end of the day, but like it does when you have casters that are like heavily into the caster role, it does limit what you can do, especially if they have things like Greater Resto. It's like, okay, well, and I do think that like some things are just straight up mean to do to players.
I mean, yeah,
like infecting someone with a slod tadpole. That bro, what's wrong with you? Why you doing that to your players?
Yeah, that's one of those like, were you bullied as a kid? Like
are you good? Bullying your players? Well, like at the same, like on the different side of the same coin, players having access to like these super powerful spells, which I know is the point. The players are supposed to feel powerful, so they have powerful spells. I understand, but at a certain point, it becomes, well, where does the DM's creativity get to come in?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fine balance, because you do want the players to use the cool spells, because like that's the point. But yeah, you don't want them. The funny thing,
don't want it to be the automatic solution.
The funny thing too is the cool spell being the automatic solution is actually bad for the player too. Like you are actually
reduces the thought process.
Yeah, you're making it less fun for yourself without even realize you're making it less fun for yourself, because you're diminishing the challenge for yourself. Like, yeah, it is actually good on both ends, but it is the thing where it's like, yes, however, GM, I have cool tool. I do want to use it sometimes. It's like, yeah.
Which is kind of why I don't like playing casters. Like, I'm okay with playing a half caster. Like, I'm okay with playing Paladin, because Paladin has, okay, yes, it has smite. I know. Paladin has big smite button. You less thought process, big smite. But you also have a bunch of like, you have auras and other abilities that you can use that affect the tide of any combat encounter. And your resources are much more limited in those than your smite slots. Or you could just cast haste because, your third level spell slots and go, hello, I hit you multiple times now and I smite. Or you give it to your friend who you probably should have haste more than you because you already hit like a fucking truck.
Yeah, just give haste to your tank so he can hit like a bigger truck.
Yeah. Yeah, then you have two moderately sized trucks instead of one Mac truck and then one regular truck.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm curious too, because I've thought about this a whole bunch. So you have 5e, right? Yeah. Let's say you're like, I'm gonna run a new game, and my players all refuse to read. In fact, their eyeballs have been gouged out. They are incapable of reading a new game. We're gonna do everything through braille and audio. But I really want to do some grungy fucking dirt farmer shit, like low magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of shit do you gotta do with a game like with 5e or a game similar to 5e to get down to that grunge, you know? Like, what kind of adjustments do you make? And by the way, let me just say this right now, up front.
Mm-hmm.
The way to make your game low magic is no, it's not to tell the players they can't play any magic classes. It's not a solution. Because again, players are not, as much as I'm making the joke, the players aren't the dirt farmers. The players are Geralt and Ciri and fucking Trish. They get the magic. The whole thing is they're weird and out of place because they have the magic. Don't tell them they don't get the magic. That's not low fantasy. You're just, I don't even know what you're doing at that point. Yeah. So you want to do a grungier, low fantasy, low magic game. What do? You go about it. In a way that doesn't
at that point you
make people
have to put a system in that makes magic riskier.
So like casting spells has to be riskier?
A little bit, yeah. So like I don't know how to explain this other than using Warhammer.
Corruption?
No. So in most Warhammer games, there is literally just a miscast chance, which can cause things to happen. Sometimes just the spell fails. Cool, whatever. Sometimes, basically think sorcerer wild magic. Basically, you roll on a table and bad things can happen, or they could just not. Zinj can just be like, "LOL, that guy's trying to cast a spell, make him short."
There's a funny miscast in Warhammer Fantasy where it's just like, your belt explodes, your pants fall down.
Yep, like, just some weird stuff happens. Like, and basically, like, I don't want to say make everybody a wild magic sorcerer, however,
but like, kind of, sort of.
Kind of, sort of. Like, it just, it just needs to have some kind of risk involved, and, maybe miscast being a thing, or not necessarily miscast, but like, if you don't meet the check, it does a little bit less damage, or the effect is slightly lessened, and you have to deal with whatever you roll on the table, whatever. Like, for instance, you have a spell that doesn't consume the material, but if you miscast and then it actually does consume the material, something like that.
Break your focus for X number of hours or something.
Mm-hmm. Like, it just needs to be. Also, it shouldn't be 100% necessary for the classes to survive. That's another thing. Like, or if you're gonna do that, like, they still have access to like cantrips, even if they miscast or whatever. Like, cantrips are a guarantee, which would make warlocks, a go-to pick. But like, higher level spell slots have a chance unless you do X, Y, and Z.
My thought then becomes, though, with jumping from that, is like, all right, so if the spell casting on the player side starts to become unreliable, what do you eventually do?
Same thing.
And do you kind of let the monsters be the same way they are now, and just they become more dangerous by virtue of fucking with some player side stuff? Do you just let that?
So I think the only thing that I would keep the same, like, I would keep innate spellcasting to this, like, the same standards as the players. But like, if it's a magical ability, that's even on the player side, it would be like something that's automatic, because that's an innate ability they have. I know I just said innate spellcasting. Shut up. Oh god, what's a good example? So like, okay, so undead warlock, being able to put on the shroud. That no failure there. That's an ability they have. That's just straight up. Whereas, casting something other than Eldritch Blast, not something that's going to be like Hunger of Vidar, or even better, instead of a concentration check, like you roll on the miscast table and see if it does anything. I don't know. This is something I'd have to sit down and like really like write out my thoughts on it completely.
Right. Yeah, obviously.
It's just one of those things where it's like I wish that low fantasy with high fantasy Magic for players was more attainable so that they could continue doing the thing, but like they had there was a feeling of risk.
Yeah, I mean you're focusing a lot on the spell casting here. But there's so many other things you would potentially have to start.
You have to look at magic items too.
Magic items is a big thing, and like also if the players, because the players are probably going to be less powerful by virtue of like their tools not being as consistent. So how much do you tune the enemies?
Yeah, there's a whole lot in it, and I do think that like players, I listen. I understand that the whole point of playing a role playing game is to feel good. Well, depending on the role-playing game, some of them...
Depending, Call of Cthulhu would say otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Call of Cthulhu is like... It's an interesting game.
You know what I would want to see?
Things about your characters.
You know what I would want to see? I want to see a role-playing game that's just like pathologic levels of fuck you. You know?
I mean...
Like
some levels of Call of Cthulhu...
I don't think it's pathologic bad. Like, it's like, you know what I'm talking about when I say pathologic, right? The game pathologic.
No.
Oh, the game. It's a game just designed to fuck you at every turn. Like,
oh, okay.
Yeah, it's there's a level of masochism for really hardcore pathologic fans that makes Dark Souls fans look like cuddly unicorns. Yeah, it's bad. Anyway, yeah, I just.
Okay, Isaiah, what might you try to add, take away, adjust?
Oh, for me, the biggest thing is you need to reward people for not playing a caster. Like, have systems in place for making a lawyer fun, making a sailor fun.
You're saying disincentivize the heavy.
Yeah, exactly. You want to disincentivize magic. Maybe and yeah, you can do that through like risk, sure. For me though, the thing that like I would want is like if I'm playing a man at arms, I'm gonna use the Witcher, not Witcher class. Give me fighting styles. I don't mean like 5e fighting styles. I mean like give me things for countering cavalry. Give me things for countering armor. Give me things to if I'm on like uneven ground, let me switch up like my sword style. If I'm playing a lawyer, have situations in place where like I can make a law check and then be like, well, sir, actually, subsection 4 of the county law says that I can actually kill this Kikimora in this lake. Fuck you, If I'm playing a sailor, give me the lowdown, like, when we're if I can go to the docks, everybody knows your name, they give you the scoop, you can talk to people, you can like argue with other boats, stuff like that.
My question there becomes, because you still have to address the player who does want to play the wizard, right? Like, what do you do with them?
With them, because they're the only one who can do magic, make them powerful. Don't mince words. Don't be like, oh, you don't want everyone to not want to play wizard, and then the wizard itself fucking blows dicks. You know what I mean? Like,
sure. You do. The problem there is like if you let them be, like, if we're assuming, right, if we're using 5e as a base, right? So a bunch of shit's getting reeled back to try and low magic this situation, but you're letting the wizard keep all their crazy shit. They're gonna potentially outshine and be the magic solve every problem button if you don't like put some kind of check or balance, right? Like then it becomes the girl has, the town has a sickness and the wizard's like, I can solve that, right?
Yeah. Well, so what you'd want there, right, is the wizard can heal one person. Cool. You got 5,000 more people to cure in this city.
Right, but again, no, but see, that's still remember, we're reeling things down. So we're assuming like, you know, because a lot of hallmarks of low fantasy is going to be like smaller towns, smaller problems, you know, more focused in. You know, so that's why it becomes the thing. So like, for example, in the Witcher setting, mages are limited because they only have like, they basically have a mana pool. They can only do so much, so, you know, so often.
And fair enough. I was thinking like Rome as opposed to like, you know, I was thinking like the city of Rome for like 5,000 people, just like you rock up to the capital and everyone's sick and everything's fucked.
Yeah. You could, yeah. To a degree. I don't know.
What I mean to say is, right, if you play like an herbologist, right, what you're doing, right, like let there be a whole mini game or like, you know, a series of checks for coming up with a cure, gaining ingredients, finding herbs, doing all this stuff. Yeah, sure, the wizard can heal one person so that they can heal the party member in a fight if they get poisoned or they catch a disease or something, but they'll never be able to cure a city of people, right? And then again, like, you have to think they got to cure the people and they could get into a fight the same day. Like, you have to really, you know, incentivize risk versus reward.
Yeah. If you want to incentivize risk versus reward, though, you're gonna have to do some adjustments because the way 5e is currently, right? Like,
oh yeah, the way it is currently. But I'm assuming like.
Well, that's what I'm saying. What would you adjust? That's what I want. That's what I'm asking. What would you adjust? You know? Like, how would you push their risk reward, for example? Like, do you give them less spell slot, for example?
I don't know that I would give them less spell slots, but I would up things like material, like maybe everything has a component that has a cost.
Everything
that's
has
extreme,
a cost,
obviously, but like,
not that
you know,
crazy.
maybe your magic focus, kind of like what Sam was talking about, like it can burn out. If you're, you know, if you're an evocation wizard and your staff, every time you cast a fire spell, your staff burns a little bit. And you're like, well, you know, these staffs are only meant to last a few weeks. We're pretty far away from the next, like, you know, Arcanum school or whatever the fuck.
Right.
From something, I don't remember what it is. And I'm not going to be able to get another focus until I go there. So I can either help these people, or
I gotta hold
the
off.
next time we fight a giant, I can blow it to hell and back.
Right. No, okay. Yeah. That's actually kind of a fun idea of like, the wizard still gets 5e levels of power, but with added like potential drawbacks. And then, you know, I'm thinking about it on the GM side of things. I'm like, I feel like I would have to really, really think about the monsters in a lot of ways, right? Because, you know, monsters in a low fantasy setting are, you know, like a group of level 5 adventurers. 4 ogres is like, psh, whatever, chumps, you know, like, 4 ogres. All right, let's fuck them up. Whereas if you're in like a low fantasy setting, a single ogre is like, oh shit, it's about to get wild, bro. So it's like, what do I do with the, you know, you know, obviously there's the really easy answers like lower player health pools. Yeah, you can. That one feels a little like, meh, kind of the lazy go-to. There's stuff like critical wounds and stuff, and you're like, okay, could work. There's the idea of like, maybe you go the opposite route. Maybe you take all the monsters in 5e as they are and pump up their stats, but lessen the quantity, right? So like, the players are never going to fight 5 ogres, but a single ogre is way stronger than they normally would be in 5e. And it's like a bigger deal to overcome. This, I think, would also require, you definitely need to adjust like the reward system situation, right? Because particularly if you're talking monster XP, because, you know, the idea of monster XP is, I mean, granted, monster XP is kind of silly in every situation, but in a low magic setting, it feels even goofier, because then you're like, oh, I need to kill 500 goblins to level up. And in like a low fantasy game, you're like, that's going to take me 50 years, right? Like 500 goblins, that's a lot. Goblins are dangerous, bro. So you'd have to do something with the reward system, like, you know, pump up the monsters, but then also pump up the reward for killing the monsters. Also, another thing would be definitely come up with always have solutions to get around the monster that isn't just fighting it. Like, make sure you're always open to, like, you know, the ogre example. You can trick the ogre and, like, get him off your back and then still give your players the XP as if they had fought him or something like that. Like, that's probably that's probably one too. Yeah, because with low magic stuff, it's like inherently you're gonna fight less because things are more dangerous. You have to account for that adjustment.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I think I've said it since day one, right? We need a massive overhaul of resistances, vulnerabilities, and immunities.
That's another thing you can take advantage of for sure. That's something the Witcher RPG actually uses a lot.
I'm sure it would. Fuck, I couldn't say that. But yeah, like, can you imagine if every creature had, like, you know, as opposed to it being like immunities, like, as opposed to having 3 separate tables, you just had all of the damage types and, like, a little pip on it for each one. You know, if it was like, you know, green, it was vulnerable, like orange, it was resistant, and red, it was immune. You just have a very simple, like, graphical layout, so you can look at every monster and go, all right, cool, all right, cool, all right, cool. You know?
Yeah. You know, the other thing that's annoying with resistance and vulnerabilities, as it is with 5e.
Are you gonna say that it's either get fucked on the player side or get fucked on the GM side? There's no in between.
Yeah,
there is no in between. But the other thing, not what I was gonna say, but also valid point. No, I was gonna say, it's such a funny mechanic because in a lot of ways, it's like, it's this mechanic that only the spellcaster gives a shit about, right? Because a lot of the time, if you're a marshal, you're like, even if he is weak to fire, I don't have anything that could do fire damage, you know? My sword is a sword. Until you get, like, once you get to higher levels, that starts to change, but, like, at lower levels, you're kind of sitting there like, well, the wizard gives a shit about that, I guess. You know, and in particular, because there are the bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing damage types, but the game barely uses them. So it's like, those should be the thing that the fighter gets to pay attention to, but the game uses them so little that the fighter just forgets about them. So, like, yeah.
I miss when skeletons only took bludgeoning damage.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? So it's like the fighter runs into the skeletons and goes, oh, fucking nut, I brought them all. And then never gets to do that again for 20 more levels. You know,
this is fucking nut.
Yeah, well, like, you know what I mean. Like, oh, you're a level 2 fighter, and you run into a horde of skeletons, and you happen to have them all, and you're like, let's fucking go. And then for the next 18 levels, you never think about that maul again. You just never could, you know, because it's like nothing's weak to bludgeoning damage. So I'm like, whatever, I don't need it. I have my fire longsword or whatever. I have my fucking flame tug or vibe of vorpal sword. Man, so it's like. Yeah, the fact that it's such a caster concern, and then not a and then you get a magic weapon and you just ignore it all anyway, and that's a whole other problem. Is like you just get the fuck you, I ignore everything button. So then the marshal's like, I don't care what anything's resistance is. I have a vorpal sword. Lick my balls.
I hit it with my stick.
I hit it good,
and I win.
You know what's something else I think would be interesting? You know, The Witcher. This is like a fundamental rule, right? Weapon material equals damage typing. You know, in a lot of stories, like anything regarding the Fae are super weak to pure iron.
Oh, I have fun story for that. Fae, any fairy, they're called fairy, but any fairy creatures in Shadow of the Demon Lord have a thing in their stat block that says if they're touching iron, they get a debuff.
Yeah, like, give me shit like that. Give me, like, you know, the Percy Jackson,
bronze for monsters, steel for humans.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like, I want that as well as damage typing, because it just further adds to the kind of shit that you can do, you know. And it makes it really makes the marshals think. It's like, oh, all right, well, we're fighting like this legendary hobgoblin champion. All right, well, he's technically a fae, so we have to bring pure iron. All right, we know we have to bring pure iron. All right, well, he's you know, he's wearing this crazy powerful plate metal, so we can't use any bludgeoning or any stabbing or slashing weapons. So we have to make sure we bring a pure iron maul. Okay, we got to bring the maul to the blacksmith. You know, like, There's so much, like, and for me at the very least, fun bookkeeping you have to do. Because when you show up with your pure iron Gothic style maul and you thunk the hobgoblin upside the head, all the work is worth it.
Yeah, I understand the fact that a lot of 4th and 5th edition D&D are supposed to be about like simplifying the game so that more people can play, and there's less bookkeeping and there's less you need to like fully understand to enjoy and play the game. Because let's face it, 2nd edition is not very welcoming.
Well, not advanced at least.
Yeah, like it's not something that you can literally just dive into. You're gonna struggle. Like, and you know what? I think that's okay.
Sam. Yeah, I've had that thought. It's kind of another topic, but yeah, it's okay to have to work a little bit to learn things.
Yeah, it's okay. Like I've had people come to me, and they I've literally this was years ago. Little off topic, but kind of same realm. I've had someone come up to me and say they don't want to have to learn how to play a game to enjoy it. And when I say learn how to play a game, I mean like the ins and outs. So like Dark Souls has a lot going on. Every Souls game does. You can play this game on a very like low level and still be able to beat it. But like as soon as you get into like hard caps, soft caps, your weapon move sets that are better than others, even if they're of the same weapon type, scaling, it can be a lot. Another example is Rainbow Six Siege. At its core, it's a shooter. But there's so much to learn. You have your maps, you have operator matchups. Like there are all these little things that you have to learn and understand to be really effective at the game and play at a much higher level. Where 5th edition, like it just kind of comes down to builds, and you can just do that before you even play the game. 2nd edition, kind of not so much, because it's like your DM could throw a monster that you don't have the proper weapon for. And you're just like, cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, I think, an issue you could run into. But I think, like, as mean as that might seem up front, it's one of those things where an ounce of preparedness goes a mile.
Absolutely. I think it's a good way to teach people, too.
Yeah, like, can you imagine how cool it would be if you were fighting... let's say you've been fighting undead for a while, so you're bringing like a mace, and then all of a sudden, we're just gonna play make believe for a second, and say like, oh, maybe Umber Hulks are super weak to piercing weapons, but they're like super resistant to magic. So maybe you have the wizard cast something like heat metal on the pure iron, and you stretch it out into like a fucked up spear, and you can start poking holes in the Umber Hulk. Like that'd be so cool.
Yeah. It's one of those. Yeah, we're straying into kind of different topic land.
I know.
I mean, at that point, it's just how do you modify the game to make it?
It becomes an interesting thought experiment, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. How do you modify the game in a lower fantasy setting to accept magic and make it not like I shoot fireball, but I do things so that martial guy can do things.
Also, like, not for nothing.
More synergistic. There we go. You make magic and martial more synergistic than just I shoot thing, I punch thing, or hit thing really hard. Like
it is also worth pointing out that like a lot of designers have put a lot of mental, like people whose job it is as game designers, put a lot of fucking thought and energy into like how to tackle this problem and have a hard time. So like obviously not an easy thing to deal with. Not an easy, no easy solution.
It's not something that is easy to do unless you're players. And here's the thing: like designing something to be fun, obviously is hard. Like I can sit here and prattle on about game design and how
both, Chief.
How some things don't make sense in certain games and why they do things like that. But like, there also comes like a point where you have to think about how the player is going to interact with what you make. Like a lot of games that have this overly complicated system they end up failing because players look at it and go, oh, I don't want to fuck with that. Making a deep system requires a lot of thought and a lot of player understanding.
Yeah, it's got to be, if you want to make a deep system, it's like it has to be deep but understandable.
Yeah. I think the best way to do it really is easy to
pick up,
easy to learn, hard to master.
Yeah.
Like you have to be able to dive in and be like, okay, cool. And like, casual players can enjoy it, but like people who really want to get into the system have to like really, really try.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that whole thing about like, that's why optional bosses in video games are always harder and the hardcore players are choosy.
Yeah, the fucking ultra bosses.
Like ultimate.
That's all the nameless kings out there.
Well, it's like Final Fantasy 14 ultimate fights are not designed for most to play.
Yeah.
Right? Like. Anyway.
I was thinking of the the Final Fantasy X Dark.
Yep,
I forget
Dark
what the
Aeons
summons are called.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aeons.
Dark Aeons.
The Dark Aeons.
Sephiroth and Kingdom Hearts.
Bro, you don't eat, like, if you ain't prepared for those fights, do not do them.
Yeah.
Dark Aeons, literally, unless you have a limit broken like party, you will probably die. Just straight up. I'm pretty sure most of their attacks will just straight up kill you.
Probably.
You're not supposed to fight those unless you have the character's best weapon and have the limit broken stuff. It's so dumb. Like, I love it, but it's dumb.
All right. So, any parting thoughts before I kill both of you? I mean, before we end.
I mean, I don't have any thoughts. I said that earlier.
Only that I will see you in ritualistic combat. Make sure you bring your bat-leth.
Sick. I will, as much as I hate that thing.
Have you ever seen the fucking American Dad skit with the puppy? And fucking Stan is like, he deserves a warrior's death. And he goes to a closet and pulls out a bat-leth and like Klingon music starts playing.
No.
I'll find it after we're done recording. It's one of my favorite bits.
I have not, but that's pretty good. All right. I mean, yeah, I
something.
Like I said, this as I correctly assumed, this was going to be kind of casual opinion fun time. So I don't really have any strong thing to leave off with. But yeah, other than if you want to run a low magic game, don't tell your players they can't play a wizard. Just let them play a fucking wizard. Don't be that guy. That's my party rules. Let your player play the goddamn.
Or just don't play D&D.
Or just don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, also.
God, you want to hear some real party words? I spoke to someone a while ago, years ago, and they were like, "Yeah, I want to do like a no magic game in 5e, where like maybe at level 10 you could take one level of wizard and you can only play martial classes, and it was X, Y. It sounded so miserable.
It was so complicated to like.
Yeah, it's just super limited on the races you could play, the classes you could play, the backgrounds you could have. And I was like, there are other games that'll probably do this way better. And they were like, nope, doing it in 5e. I was like, why?
Again,
and it was just like, I want to learn anything else. Like, but you're making a new game. You're breaking this game so much that you're making
so much.
A new
it's
game.
like, what's the simian behavior? Goddamn.
Yeah, it was. I literally, it just got to where I just couldn't talk about it anymore. I literally like. People I knew were being like, "Oh yeah," so like they're still trying this thing, and I was like, I don't even want to talk about it. Like it had me mauling to think about.
I also would be mauling because that's fucking dumb.
Yeah, it was painful.
I listen. I like the fact that a lot of people will. Mess with systems. It does.
Yeah, I mean,
invoke
game
a certain
design
level of creativity.
Is a good
game design is good.
Thing
It's a good thing, especially when you're a DM. It's a good thing to think about when you're running a game.
Yeah,
but like, bro, not every system is made for every single idea that you have. Please,
don't design with blinders on.
Like, don't go and be like, oh, I want to play a Star Wars game, but I don't like the Star Wars system, so I'm going to do it in 5e. Please don't do that.
God.
I want to play Star Wars, but I hate lightsabers. So you're like, God damn it.
sci-fi, so why play Star Wars?
Yeah, I really want to play a really grounded high fantasy game, or a really grounded hard sci-fi game, but in Star Wars. It's like,
Wait, why?
All right.
What you doing?
Anyway, that has been us. You enjoyed the nonsense you've heard, and you didn't hit the follow or subscribe button before when I asked you very nicely. Hit it now, or I'm coming to your house. Also, if you liked what you heard, perhaps leave a rating or a comment on your podcast platform of choice, if they let you leave a rating or a comment. And if you'd like to stay up to date, follow us on the Twitters. For example, if you're wondering, why did the episode go up on Thursday? I thought they go up on Wednesdays. If you had followed us on Twitter, you would know the answer to that question.
Yes.
Crazy, I know. Night.
Bye.
Bye.